Welcome to the Black Table, an hour devoted to exploring ideas, subjects, people of special importance to African people worldwide and to others fighting to build a better society. Today, we are joined by another long-distance runner, a founding parent of the field of Black studies, a warrior, intellectual, activist, institution builder. This is one of the most important thinkers that we've produced over the last century. DC native, spent many years in Chicago, and for the last 50 years, and he'll correct me if we're wrong here, for the last 50 years, he has been at the University of Massachusetts in the Department of Afro-American Studies, where he has served as chairman 2 terms over the arc and built the second PhD program in the field of Black Studies. We're welcoming today to the Black Table none other than John H. Bracey, Jr. Welcome, Professor Bracey. How are you?
No, I'm good. Like I tell people, I wake up and I open my eyes, I look around, I'm still here, so I go to work.
And that is true, brother. That is true. We only have a little less than an hour today, so we want to get right to the point. First of all, thank you for joining us. When we put together the Black Table, you are one of the names that immediately came not only to mind, but it was a command. We have to get John Bracey at the table to discuss. Can we start at the beginning? You're a DC man, huh? You were a DC kid raised in DC in the shadow of the campus of Howard University. Was it 4 generations of educators in your family? I know your mom, Helen Harris Bracey, was on the faculty in the School of Education. Could you tell us a little bit about growing up in DC? Because I still find it hard to believe that Sterling Brown helped correct your writing and you knew Dorothy Porter, Wesley. Can you talk us about what it was like to grow up in DC? I guess this would have been the 40s and 50s.
Yeah. I was actually born in Chicago, but my father worked as a waiter on the Pennsylvania Railroad. So my mom's wanted a steady job, so she got a job at Howard. She met my dad at Bethune-Cookman, but see, my mom went to high school, went to college when she was 15, graduated when she was 19, had a Rosenwald, and then had a Jeans Foundation fellowship. And she went down to Bethune-Cookman to meet Miss Bethune, talk to Miss Bethune. And Miss Bethune gave her a letter, it's in Bethune papers. Go over to the dean of students. I want him to hire you. And that's what the recruitment process was. This is the bearer of this letter is Mrs. Helen Constance Harris. Please hire her, right? Well, she met my dad at Bethune-Cookman. He's only like 1 year older than her because she graduated from college at 19. And she's teaching when she's 19, taught at Tougaloo when she's 13. She and my aunt, they taught in the Daniel Hand schools. See, I got 10 Tougaloo alums in my family.
Tougaloo. So when August Meyer, who we'll talk about a little bit later, ends up at Tougaloo, he's actually following in your footsteps, not the other way around.
No. He know the people that he taught at Tougaloo were friends of my mom's.
Wow.
So when I did a book with Augie, they started laughing because they said Augie was crazy even then. They said Augie would go around reading and bumping into the light post and apologizing to the light post and all this stuff. I mean, Augie was a trip. Right? So when I first met him, he knew all of the same people I knew. But my mom's wanted a steady job, especially because I was born in World War I, 3 months before, Pearl Harbor, right? So there weren't a lot of jobs. So she said, I'm gonna stay fixed. And so she did Tuskegee, and then she went back to Howard, right? And so I grew up on the campus of Howard University, right? My dad was gone because he's on the railroad, right? So, it was like a female-headed household. Mm-hmm. My sister went to college when she was 15, right? She skipped grades like it didn't even matter. She went to Dunbar High School, which I wanted to go to. I wanted to go to Dunbar. I'm still pissed about that. Integration.
I'm sure you are.
Did not let me go to Dunbar.
Why not?
Right?
You
had to go to neighborhood schools, man. This is after Brown.
But I know you went to Banneker Junior High School.
Yeah, but Banneker was a junior high, and I was ready to go to Dunbar. Yeah. But then they integrated the schools in D.C., so you had to go to a school in your neighborhood. So I had a choice. I could go to Cardozo with all the gangbangers, right? All my thug friends. I said, I ain't going. No. I already know y'all. Like, I ain't fooling with y'all. The Jolly Stompers, Joy Park, all them. Right? I said, no. So you had a choice of Roosevelt or Coolidge. So all my partners up on the hill, second alphabet in D.C., second alphabet, went to Roosevelt. So here I am, integrated role, hated it. I hated 3 years. I didn't learn anything 3 years at Roosevelt. The teachers hated us. The principal hated us. The principal was testifying that integration wasn't working. They were always asking you, did you want to join the army? I mean, it was like war. I was at war for 3 years in high school.
Bob, I don't want us to leave this for a second, just to sit in this for a minute, because so far you've talked about Black institutions producing this incredible standard that you were born into, but then you become a shock troop in integration. You literally live that intersection, huh?
But that's what the irony was. The irony was that what we wanted, if you look at the early Black studies, what Mike and all and I wanted was to have Howard University in microcosm.
Yes, sir.
Right? Because I knew more than the white folks did, because I had to know their stuff, because I did. I mean, I can quote me some Shakespeare. You know, you have done the state some service and I know it. You know, all that kind of stuff. I can do it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, went to the sessions of sweet silent thought, I sum up remembrance of things. I can do some Shakespeare, right? But you can't do Langston Hughes.
No, sir.
Life for me ain't been no Crystal Stair.
No, sir.
Right? Or no Dunbar. No, an angel
Sterling Brown, who you knew. You knew Sterling Brown as a kid.
And that's right. And that's how you signified on somebody. When you come at me, don't come by ones and twos. You better come by tens.
No question.
That's Sterling Brown. No. And if you have Dunbar High School, you're saturated with poetry and culture. Right? You're saturated with it. I studied violin for 12 years. I played first violin, studied with Louis Jones, right? Who Du Bois said was the greatest Black violinist of the 20th century.
That's right.
That's right. That's what free. He knew my mom. I didn't pay a penny because we didn't have any money, right? So whenever I went to violin lessons, he put me in whatever class was happening. So it might be an ensemble, it might be a full orchestra, it might be two people. He said, play with them. So I got the best free music education you could get, and you had to take tests on music theory.
My God. Yeah, and not only that type of education, in the cultural grounding, you've written extensively, and by the way, you all over 24 books, either edited or introduced or single author, not counting all the other publications, but you've written about music. Could you tell us a little bit about what it was like to leave your house and walk to the Howard Theater or Bohemian Cameras and the Dunbar Lounge, and maybe
oh man, you talk about, you know, like, and first of all, you know, the Howard Theater was the bomb, right? You know, and you went to the, you know, doo-wop. I grew up on doo-wop, bebop first. I love bebop, right? So you went to all them clubs. I never told my moms because you weren't supposed to go to them kind of places, right? So I said, yeah, I'm going out and I say blah, 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 blah. And if you go into one of them cafes where the dudes be cutting you and all that stuff, and they, you know, drinking slow gin in the bathrooms and all, because nobody wanted to pay the cover charge and all that business. But it's the best music in the world, man.
Yes, sir.
You know,
yes, sir.
And I loved, you know, I'd go to New York on the bus and go to Birdland and hear Miles when Miles had Coltrane in the group. Man.
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir.
I'm like 19 years old.
Come on, man. I'm about to say, you must have been a kid. So you saw Train before he got strung out and Miles put him out the band.
Look, we were when I worked in a camp on Staten Island as a third cook. I basically washed pots, but I didn't like the title pot washer, so I said, "Can I call myself third cook?" The cook said, "You call yourself King of England, long as the pots get clean." So but what my little buddy did was he took me to every place in New York because he liked jazz too. So we went to the Five Spot, the Blue Note, all these places, man, Birdland, and so I'm sitting in the peanut gallery because I'm too young to drink. Right. So I ain't had to buy no liquor. They charge you the same amount for a Coke. But I'm sitting there, it's Miles Davis Quintet with Coltrane, Cannonball, Adderley, Wynton Kelly. And we hollering in because they were cutting Coltrane off, man. We love Coltrane from the beginning when he's playing tenor, before he got to soprano. Giant Steps, all that stuff with Miles, man. Green Dolphin Street, right? And Coltrane be like blowing, man, and Miles and Adderley would close up in front of him and cut him off, man. We said, let him play, man, let him play. And so finally Coltrane got out of there.
Yeah.
You know, he left him, right?
Yeah.
And so I saw him every time he came to Chicago or anywhere, I'd go see John Coltrane.
Well, we're gonna pause in about 60 seconds, but before we do, let's see, can we squeeze this in? You decided that you were going to Howard, but you didn't stay. What happened?
No, I went for 1 year. You never go to a school where your mother teaches. Everybody remembers you from when you were 5 years old.
No question.
Right? And so they still look at me like I'm 5 years old, even though I'm in college, right?
Of course. And
my sister's boyfriend was the TA for the biology class. So she's sitting there grading papers in my living room asking me, what grade do I want? Well, this is not education, right? Come on.
It's not education.
It's not education. I would have been But the thing that really got me was Frazier. Frazier wrote Black Bourgeoisie.
And for those here at the table who don't know that name, that of course is the great Edward Franklin Frazier, the great sociologist. Yes.
Frazier wrote Black Bourgeoisie in French.
That's right.
And left it in the library for 2 years. And people would come by and say, "Oh, I read your book." And Frazier would say, "That Negro can't read a word of French. He's lying, right?" But Frazier would sit in people would hide in my mom's office, right next on the elevator in Douglas Hall, second floor.
Second floor at Douglas Hall, yes, sir.
That's right. And that little tiny little office, I'd be in there and looking out the window doing my homework. And Frazier would come back and sit next to me, and I'd be listening to all of, be William Banner and Mayford Logan and Robert Martin, Sterling Brown, and all of them. And he would say, "What do you think they're talking about?" I said, "I don't quite get all of it." He said, "Don't worry about it. They don't get it either." And he cracked up laughing. He says, "Son, you got to learn the difference between a PhD and a Negro PhD." He said, white people would give any Negro a PhD because they know they ain't going to teach their kids. They're going back to a black school and they don't care whether you know anything or not.
They don't care.
Right? So there are a lot of people walking around. They call themselves doctor.
Yes, sir.
Right? But ain't nothing going on up there because white people didn't teach them anything and they didn't care if they didn't learn anything.
Bob, I'm afraid sometimes it's worse now than it may have been when you were coming along. But I tell you what, we're going to pick up with that on the other side of the break. We're going to pause for a moment. And when we come back, we are going to pick up with Professor John Bracey, who's just given us a very quick but profound glimpse into his early life and beginning. And when we come back, we're going to go to the city of Chicago and Roosevelt University. Back in a moment at the Black Table.
These are the only bins that will accommodate larger overboard.
They put 10 in here?
10, and you don't come out till you die. And you eat him, you eat 10.
Oh my God.
So what?
Welcome back to the Black Table. I'm Greg Carr here on the Black Star Network with Professor John Bracey, and we're honored to have him. Prof, when we left, you had gotten some sterling insight from the great E. Franklin Frazier. I think he was the first Black president of the American Sociological Association, wasn't he? And then, so you decide to go west, young man. You end up in the Midwest, in the city of big shoulders, at a very radical idea of a university, Roosevelt University, which, if I'm not mistaken, may be younger than you are, a very young university at the time. Tell us about going to Roosevelt, man. What was that like? What kind of place was Roosevelt University?
Well, after 1 year at Howard, I quit and took the civil service exam and got a job working in the mailroom out in Arlington Hall Station near the Pentagon. That's when I knew how messed up the government and the military was, because I delivered mail, right? I had a top secret clearance, man. My most important work, I couldn't get it after I left, but my most important work was making sure that the Joint Chiefs of Staffs got in their bets on the World Series or a football game, right? So I'm running around with a red cover over a football pool, and the work you could do in like about 3 hours. And the first day I was in the mailroom, I got a ride. You had a little car, took you over from Arlington Hall over to the Pentagon. You go to the Pentagon, you give the guys the mail, pick up the mail bag, and you come back. I came back about 2 o'clock, and they said, "Why are you back?" I said, "Well, I took the mail over, got the mail back." They said, "Don't ever come back here before 5 o'clock." He said, "If they find out that we can do this in 3 hours, they'll fire half of us." So I said, "What am I supposed to do?" They say, "Do whatever you want. Go to the movies, take 3 lunches." So what I did was I could order anything related to my job because I was in the mailroom. So I started reading the U.S. Army field manuals on African countries. They did a report on the military situation in every African country.
What was this, 1959, 60?
59, 60. And
So
they're getting ready for
right
African
colonization. This is right. Like the year of Africa is 1960. And as folks, some of you all may not know, some of you know, right?
They're getting ready for African independence, and they want to know who everybody, and they don't lie to each other. You understand? They may lie in the books you get in school, but the military, they ain't got time to be lying because their lives depend on them getting stuff right.
Well, that's what a lot of people say. Say of the historians, the military historians are the best to read because all they trying to figure out is how to beat you. So they got to be honest.
That's right. So you got your view of Nkrumah. They got an inside view saying he's this, and this, but we got him on this one over here. We got him on this one over here. And this is where we can go after him. Right. And so I'm reading every African country I can get my hands on. Right. And this is part of my job. Right. Then they taught us how to run. We had to run the movie projectors. And the white guys brought in 8mm porno films, dogs and monkeys, all kind of weird stuff. Me and this other brother, first we looked at the Olympics all the way down to 1956. They had films. And then we got into Nuremberg trials, film. We looked at the army films when they liberated the concentration camps. And we looked at the liberation of Dachau and Buchenwald, those people coming out of there.
Did you see the black soldiers?
Yeah. We're sitting there saying, these are white people doing this to other white people.
That's right.
You know how they feel about us. I mean, if you look at the Jewish people coming out of Buchenwald and Dachau.
Yes, sir.
Right. It's like, what human beings would do that to another human being? And we sat there thinking, these are white people doing this to white people. Like, we down the line,
So how did you end up, it's interesting. I was looking at a bit of footage. I don't know if you may have seen it, may not. You were over at the Center for Inner City Studies. I guess it's the old Abraham Lincoln building. Harold Pates, Nick Nelson, Anderson Thompson on a panel dealing with Harold Cruz. And I mean, and we know each other a long time, but I'd never seen that clip. And it's just reiterated for me how important you are and were in that early intellectual work. But so far, I mean, how do you end up going to Chicago to study in the first place? Was that the moment that shocked you, working at the Pentagon, seeing that and saying,
no, my cousin Billy, the one that taught me bebop.
Yes, sir.
There's only one school in the country that will put up with you. And he said, that's a school called, it says Roosevelt. And I said, why you think so? Because it's full of crazy people just like you. And so I transferred to Roosevelt. And when I hit Roosevelt, you go to the cafeteria and every organization had a table. So I just got there, like every political tendency, you had the Yipsos, the Communist Party, the Trotskyists, anarchists, everybody, the school for management, everybody, and you sat at the table that had your thing, right?
Yes, sir.
So I had already met Sterling Stuckey in the civil rights movement because I'd already got, starting to do civil rights stuff. And I found a table with the black people and I said, like, what's supposed to be happening around here? They said, first of all, you have to take Drake. And I said, what is Drake? And Sinclair Drake was moving down the hallway real fast, big afro before you had afros, a whole stack of Xeroxes in his hand, shirt tail out. And he said, that's Drake, take whatever he teaches, right? And from that day on, if you were in the class, you got a seat. But you took Drake's class every time he taught it because it was different every time, right? If you weren't registered in the class, you had to sit on the floor in the windowsill. right? Because only the students that were paying for the class got the seats, right? So I took Drake like 5 different times. I lived in his office. I'd follow him down the hall, and he pushed you to work. You sit in the office, he say, here, I want you to put these folders in order for me. And I said, oh, what is this? He said, well, these are Bussia's files on Nkrumah. And I said, why do you have them? He said, well, Bracey was writing this expose of corruption in the Convention People's Party, and he thought Kwame was on to him, so he gave me the whole. And I said, wow, what am I supposed to do with this? He said, well, you got to write a paper in geography class, right on the cocoa marketing board. I'm writing on the cocoa marketing board, but Gojo Matsi and all them guys, right? You know, the cocoa farmers.
Of course. As an undergraduate at Roosevelt University,
That's
under
right.
the tutelage of the great, and for those of you who don't know this name, write this one down too, John Gibbs.
He's the greatest teacher I ever had. Man, I love St. Clair. Right?
But Drake wasn't alone on that faculty, huh? There was Lorenzo Dow Turner was on that faculty.
Turner taught on Saturdays. African culture and New World. He taught on Saturdays so community people could take the class.
This is so important, y'all. And for those
church folk, people would come. He would give you a test at the first day of the class. He said, if you can identify the origin of these songs we're going to play, you get an A in the class. So he'd play like a clip out of a song, right? I said, oh, we know that. That sounds like my grandmama's church. They said, no, that's Barbados. He said, oh, crap. And he said, okay, what's the next one? Then he played da-da-da-da-da. You say, well, okay, if that was, then that must be Alabama. He said, no, that's West Africa. He said, you don't have to go to Africa to find Africa. Africa's in you. It's here.
American culture, the great,
it's here.
The Lorenzo, man, my God.
And he could break down your accent. I threw him off because I was born in Chicago, but I grew up in D.C. And he said, you don't have a Midwest accent. You got a Southern Mid-Atlantic thing in there. He could do that. And he would say, you got Mid-Atlantic and I don't know, and you got any Gullah in your family? I'd say, yeah, my maternal grandparents were from South Carolina. He said, yeah, I can hear it. I can hear it in your voice.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I said, like, whoa. I loved him. I loved him. Quiet, gentle man. But he was spying on the Portuguese for African liberation movements, holding Roberto and all them. He was saying, look, you going around recording tapes of people singing and dancing. Why don't you keep track of how they're treating them? So he went back and wrote a report on how Portuguese colonialism was hurting Black people, Africans. And then he published that, and then he said, they wouldn't let me come back and finish up my field study, but I guess that's okay. And he just is calm about it. Like he could have gotten killed doing that.
Of course.
He was in danger doing that. But he just that's his duty. He said, I'm not just there to study Black people. I'm there to use my knowledge of Black people to put me in a position where I can help Black people. So he is risking his life going to Portuguese territories, gathering data on Portuguese imperialism.
See,
and as a radical at all.
So that helps us get a little bit of insight into your own life and practice in terms of how you combine intellectual work with social transformation. I mean, some of your classmates, I know, Darlene Clark-Hines, Julian Welker, Bob Harris, who talks about that faculty, but not only them, but at that time in Chicago, I think, like you say, Sterling Stuckey, James Turner is at Northwestern, but you're also in the community. Could you talk a little bit about your social activism in Chicago? I know you interacted with Malcolm X. If memory serves me correctly, you got into a little bit of a debate, and you actually gave him a book recommendation that he took, changed his life. Talk a little bit about Chicago and social activism during that period.
My whole life, I was always taught. I'll tell you where it got started. When I was 4 years old in World War II with my Sanford, Florida, with my grandfather, who was a mechanic on the Atlantic Coastline Railroad, could take apart a locomotive engine. I was too young to go to school, so I hung with him. Every Sunday, he had a full-length mirror in the hallway, and he dressed up in his white suit, straw hat, cane, and I'd have my little white suit, short pants, white shoes, my little bow tie, and he'd look at the mirror and say, Sister Bracey, Lord ain't but the one, and say, and who are you, sir? I would say, I'm John Henry Bracey Jr., sir. Lord ain't but the one. So from the time I was 4 years old, I knew who I was. I wasn't nobody else. Right?
Yes.
So I could get along with anybody because I wasn't going to join everything that showed up.
Yes, sir.
Right? I have friends that are Muslims, but I'm not a Muslim. I can go to the Nation of Islam and tell Malcolm, like, I ain't joining. Malcolm said, why don't you come and join us in the Nation? I said, I ain't wearing no bow tie. I ain't selling no newspapers.
Yes, sir.
And said, I'm going to go to Pepper's and the Trocadero and get me some pig ear sandwiches, drink me some gin, and listen to some blues. And Malcolm laughed and said, I was there once too. I said, well, I'm still there. I ain't left yet. And he said, well, okay, you can work from the outside. No, if you know who you are, then you're not afraid of other people. Like I'm not a separatist. I'm not afraid of white people.
Right.
I'm a nationalist. That is to say, if we're the majority in a community, we should run that community. If it's a nation state, a neighborhood, or a city, if Black people are the majority, they should have, if you believe in democracy,
let's
have the power in that.
Let's pause here for a moment, Prof. When we come back on the other side, let's pick up exactly there. As a nationalist, as a Pan-Africanist who is not a separatist, such an important ideological distinction. We're going to pick up on the other side with you and your intellectual work and interests over the years, extending out of those Chicago years. We're going to come back in just a second here at the Black Table with Professor John Bracey. Back in a minute.
We welcome you to the launch of the Mass Poor People's Low Wage Assembly and Moral March on Washington, D.C., June 18, 2022.
We are a new, unsettling force, and we are powerful. New, unsettling force, and we are here.
We're rising up to demonstrate the compelling power that we, poor and low-income people, have to reconstruct society from the bottom up.
And we need to do it with the loudest voices possible, the biggest actions possible.
Because we know that there is no scarcity in this land. The only scarcity is the moral will to do what's right.
Hold on, just a little while longer.
We are those with sub-minimum wage jobs who can't afford sky-high rent.
People with disabilities are the fastest growing minority group.
It's crazy to me that in 2021, it's still legal for workplaces to pay a sub-minimum wage to people with disabilities.
There are still so much trial and tribulations that we go through as Indigenous people. We can't get a decent wage to sustain ourselves, nor can we get adequate housing.
Veterans across this nation say enough is enough. We can't pat essential workers on the back on one day and then cut their health care the next day.
Health is a political choice.
What more do I need to do to prove that my voice is just as valuable as anyone else's?
There are still forces in denial that would try to slow walk our transition to a clean economy and a just future for us all.
We have an immoral system run by immoral people.
But together we walk and we fight.
It's time for a change. Reconstruyamos esta gran nación.
See, we are people of resilience as we fight these interlocking injustices together.
When we work together, mobilize together, and rise together, we become a voice for the voiceless, and we become an agent of change in a time where great change is needed.
We need the third reconstruction to ensure that deaf people, people with disabilities, and all people can have the right to live and to thrive.
We know what they are doing, but the question is, what are we going to do? Reconstruction begins when we change our mentality and say it's time for you to get your foot off of my neck.
Justice is coming soon.
Do you believe that today?
Welcome back to the Black Table. We are engaged in a riveting conversation with Professor John Bracey of the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, one of the founding fathers of the field of Black studies. Prof, when we left, you were telling us about your commitment to social transformation, grounding in the Black community, but not exclusive to the Black community. You encountered two figures during your years at Roosevelt, August Meyer and Elliot Rudwick, white scholars who became very important in African-American intellectual history. But you talk about the importance of mentorship. They didn't treat you like a student, did they? Because in the space of a handful of years, you all published so many. How many books did you all publish together? Was it 13, 14?
Like 12, 14, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, everything from Black workers, the book called The Rise of the Ghetto, Conflict and Competition on Black Social Movements. You wrote about Black women, free Blacks. The book that we probably were introduced to more than any single book was, of course, you all's edited book on Black nationalism in America. Could you talk a little bit about, because these are white scholars, and I know there was back and forth. Remember Mac Jones and them, like all these white guys coming in, but you didn't run from that. You wrote about your Blackness, but you did it with these two white authors. Talk a little bit about your relationship with Meyer and Rudwick, if you don't mind.
Look, my view is that Black people are so important. I want the smartest white people to study them too, because we're not going to win if Black people only study Black people for Black people. We're a minority population. We need at best to neutralize white, people, or to get allies who know your work and your people as well as you do. And so you want the smartest white people to study Black people, right? And we won that one. If you name the top 10 white American historians, they write about Black people. Eric Foner or David Blight. Right? You make a reputation as a white scholar, Eugene Genovese. You write about, if you look at the top 10 white scholars, they write about Black people. We won that.
Because if memory serves me correctly, it was C. Van Woodward, right? That you put in Malcolm's hand. I mean, you told him you need to read The Strange Career of Jim Crow or something like that.
No, it was Stamp, Kenneth Stamp.
Oh, it was Kenneth Stamp. Yeah.
Kenneth Stamp was a Trotskyist. Right, I didn't know all these connections to, but Augie's a Shackmanite. People forget that. Augie was the left, but he never told anybody.
Wow.
He's a Shackmanite, and he's the one that had me read Max Shackman, Race and Revolution. Nobody reads that stuff at all, man. These things are, and there's a network of Tom Kahn, Bayard Rustin, and Augie who are Shackmanites.
Interesting.
So Augie's a radical, making like he's a liberal because he's afraid of McCarthyism.
And then just to bring it full circle with your own life, a woman you knew as a kid on the campus of Howard University, Dorothy Porter, Augie Meyer writes about the fact that she led him by the hand through the stacks in the Moreland collection to write his dissertation, which of course became Negro Thought in America. But you didn't know that at the time, I guess, when he was I didn't
know. What got me about Augie is that he knew all these people that I knew. Like, I used to do my homework in the Moreland Spin Garden because nobody was in there.
Right.
Nobody. When I'm in elementary school, and my sister and I would come up from Mott Elementary School. My mom's is teaching. She's director of student teaching. She taught Toni Morrison before she was Toni Morrison. She taught Amiri Baraka, because you don't know that you're going to be famous.
No question.
Right? So you got to get a teaching certificate so you can get you a job teaching.
Yes, sir.
And my mom was director of student teaching, Roberta Flack. She integrated the music department at Alice Deal High School with Roberta Flack.
Yes, sir.
You could see Roberta Flack for $1 out on Alabama Avenue in a trio before you ever heard of Roberta Flack. Cost you $1.
So while your mother is literally crafting these folks who now, of course, are globally legendary, you're in the Moreland room being babysat intellectually by the woman who ends up directing Augie Meyer's dissertation before you met. You knew Dorothy Porter. She's in there watching you, basically.
She did the same thing to me. I would sit there and I say, Miss Porter, I got to do a paper on Toussaint Louverture. She said, come on in the back. She take you to the back and she pull out primary documents. And so I could write a paper for junior high school based on primary documents.
My God.
She said, don't read what they say about Toussaint. This is what Black people say about Toussaint. This is what Haitians say about Toussaint.
So let me.
And she trusted, yeah.
And again, given the time, I just want to make sure that so she does the same thing with Meyer, who then becomes one of the major figures in African American intellectual history, and then turns to you as an undergraduate at Roosevelt, along with Elliot Ruderick, and says, "Come on, we're getting ready to publish all these primary documents and do this intellectual history." How did that influence your own work? Because you've shaped so many careers. I think about even my generation: Stephanie Evans, Kathy Adams, who of course is on our here often. How did that shape your interaction with students? That relationship.
They treated me like an equal. I have yet to understand why or how, but I was never patronized by people that were older than me. They treated me as an equal. The only people that I was deathly afraid of intellectually was the Washington Park Forum. It's the one place I never spoke. Otis Hyde. These were working class Black people, radical Black people. They knew more about everything than anybody. And I would watch them eat up people that stepped into that circle. Otis would say, "We have a young man here from the University of Chicago, and he's going to tell you something about slavery." And people would kind of chuckle and say, "Come on, bring it." You run your little mouth about what you learned at the University of Chicago. These working class people that worked in packing house and worked in the steel mills ate you up. They ate you up.
That's beautiful.
They humiliated you. They ran you out of there in shame. And Otis would say, "And we have a young brother here from Roosevelt. Do you have anything you want to say?" I said, no. You're not getting me in there. I ain't doing that. Like I know my elders. I know who know what. Like I can do that at Roosevelt.
Well,
I ain't stupid in that circle. Otis read everything. Otis was a working class brother. Otis Hyde. He read everything all the time. He would correct you. You say something, he said, "That's what not that. Read the third volume of Capital. You quoting the first volume."
My God. See, Prof, I hope our viewers really understand the lesson you're teaching us now, because I know for those of us who either apprentice with you, been deeply influenced with you, in conversation with you, that your generation, I think about Anderson Thompson, I think about Michael Thelwell, I think about so many others, Ernie Allen, a lot of people who end up at UMass, for example, with you.
Yeah.
That is y'all's attitude. You're no respecter of institutions. And I know we don't have a whole lot of time, because we know you've edited volumes of the Revolutionary Action Movement papers with your friend Muhammad Ahmad and so many others. We could talk about some of these formations, the NAACP papers work you've done. But I want to at least get us to the University of Massachusetts, where you've been for 50 years. I think this is the 50th year, right? And, you all created the second PhD program in African American Studies in the country. But more importantly, you established a beachhead to bring the sensibility you're describing now into the academy. Could you talk a little bit about the Black Studies fight, the fight to establish Black Studies, and what you've been doing over these last decades now to keep that fight alive? And I know we all know it really is a fight. Could you talk a little bit about that?
No. What we did, we didn't come to UMass grateful to be there. We brought in people that were better than the white people that were there. So you say you want African writers. We got Chinua Achebe. I'm the one that got him to do that chancellor lecture. Randolph Bromley was a Black chancellor, and he said, "Get on this committee about lectures." I said, "I don't want, no, get on this committee." I get on the committee, they start nominating all these white people, blah, 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 blah. And I said, "Excuse me, have you heard of Chinua Achebe?" They said, "Who is that? What did he do?" I said, "Well, I happen to have his beta right here. Why don't you add him to the first year people, so it's not just old white guys, right?" That's when Chinua ate him up with that thing on Conrad. He didn't tell us what he's writing. He didn't say a word. I said, "How you doing with the Conrad piece?" He said, "Yeah, he didn't tell us about Conrad." He said the thing was called The Image of Africa. And Chinua didn't say a word to nobody. He didn't have they added the subtitle after the thing came out. But Chinua said, "Yeah, I'm writing about the image of Africa." And I said, "Well, that's a broad topic." He said, "Yeah." And Chinua ate him alive. We hooping and hollering. We in the auditorium full of people. And Chinua starts to read Conrad to these white people, and then he stops right scared cold and said the man was a bloody racist, and we hollered. The white people sat there and said, like, "Oh crap!" I just say, Conrad, I wrote 3 books on Conrad. They said, "General just blew him out of the water."
Out of darkness. What year was this, Prof?
This is 1974.
74.
1974.
So
it was
by
the first
then,
chancellor's lectures.
the first chancellor's lectures. But by then, you all reach far beyond the academy. Where you Sonia Sanchez and Archie Shep, and so could you name some of the people y'all brought to?
We brought the year I came. They were look. We got there because of Herbert Aptheker. Herbert Aptheker was supposed to come with the Du Bois papers. Harvard wouldn't take the papers because they said Aptheker was a communist. And Aptheker said it's also because I'm Jewish, right? Then there wasn't no Apthekers on Harvard's campus. Right?
My God.
So the papers came down to UMass.
And by the way, those of you who haven't read Herbert Aptheker's biography, did you write the foreword? I'm trying to remember now. I have to look for it.
No, I did a preface to the American Negro Slavery Votes.
Yes, to American Negro Slavery Votes. Right, new edition. You know what? Let's pause here, Prof, because we are running right up against the clock. We got one more block. When we come back, I want you to pick up with there to talk about those early days at UMass, and then we'll end with you kind of visiting some of the broad themes in your work and what you're working on now. When we come back right after this break at the Black Table with Professor John H. Bracey, Black Star Network, back in the room.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Faraji Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
Welcome back to the Black Table. I'm Greg Carr here at the Black Star Network with Professor John Bracey. We're going to have a part 2, Professor Bracey, because we have missed a thing. You've packed this hour with so much. When we left, you were talking about the early days of the UMass program and the folks you were bringing in. And in fact, you mentioned Herbert Aptheker. Of course, we know now the library at the University of Massachusetts is named for W.E.B. Du Bois. Could you talk about what you all have tried to achieve, and in fact have achieved with that program? I know, of course, I went to Temple, which was the first PhD program in African States. Right. But when the UMass program came online, a lot of my fellow students finished their master's degrees and came to you for the PhD. I think of Andrew Rosa and Kathy Adams. And we know that introductory 50-book course is legendary. Talk a little bit about how y'all designed this program and what you were trying to accomplish there at UMass and the impact it's had on the field.
What we saw was that people were coming to our program that didn't know our undergraduate major. So what we wanted to do in our major works was to replicate our undergraduate major in 1 year. So that in effect was the 30 hours of the undergraduate major in 1 year in a seminar. I wanted 100 books. See, because when Augie came to Roosevelt, he passed out a sheet of paper that had 25 books on it. And we said, "This is a bibliography." He said, no, this is the reading list. I said,
"Was it 25? You said we lost that number.
25.
He gave you a sheet of paper and you said, "Is this the bibliography?" No, this is the reading list for the class.
Yeah. No, so I know you can do it. I said, start reading. And your work is, full fellowship. Your work, 40 hours a day, 40 hours a week, is to read and to study. Don't do nothing else. Read and study. Don't teach because you don't know anything. You can't teach if you don't know anything. Read.
You dropping
get up. If you go to the library at 9 in the morning, take a break for class, go back to the library at 5, you will have all your work done and you have free time on the weekend. It's your job.
It's your job.
Right? So we wanted the undergraduate major, we want that in your head in 1 year. Then we can get you to the graduate level, the specialized work. But you got to have the language of the discipline. You got to know the fundamentals.
And I've heard you talk incessantly, regularly about the value of time. how this society would be very different if intellectual work, if there was time for intellectual work. People have to take the time to do that. Can you talk about how important this kind of community of learners is, this concept, either in the university, and the Black colleges, I'm afraid, are following along the line of some of the worst tendencies of the white ones in terms of cutting out this notion of intellectual work. Could you talk a little bit about?
No, the fact is we have a notion in intellectuals is that somehow we're special and different from other people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? My experience, even though I grew up on Howard's campus, I lived in Northwest DC in a Black neighborhood, right?
Yeah. Yes.
I shined shoes at a barbershop and cut hair in my cousin's barbershop, right? I could never be this wino. I never forget Daniel Napa. He was drunk all the time. He would always beat me at the crossword puzzles in the newspaper. And then he'd laugh at me and say, "Young blood, you going to college, you better get to work because your stuff ain't tight." This guy's drunk telling me this. Brains are not just in the academy. The crime in this world is that there are people that could solve cancer.
Yes, sir.
But they're out chopping cotton, or they're working in a field somewhere, or they don't have time to think. The most important thing you can give people is the time to think. We don't know how many geniuses, right, are sitting there in their spare time reading physics, but then they got to get back to the assembly line. So they'll never get to a school. You find them in community colleges. So if you want to see some really strong people,
yes, sir.
Most people that work, they got a full-time job.
Yes, sir.
But they come in your class, they do the reading. They ain't playing.
That's
they
right.
Ain't playing.
That's right.
They said, no. This is my step to get me the time to do the rest of my thinking.
Yes, sir.
You have to know, the smartest people are not necessarily the people in the academy.
Absolutely.
I met people in the barbershops, the Washington Park Forum. I met people in New York working in the kitchen with me.
Of course.
They could school me on a lot of things.
Of course.
And so don't think because you guys, you grew up on a college campus that you know everything. You say, no, you know what you learn on a college campus. But can you learn about this? Do you know this?
Much of your writing and much of your work documenting social movements has kind of been focused at those folks who are not at the university. I know you edited a whole volume, for example, co-edited with many others, a volume on Black women, African-American women, and the vote. Could you talk a little bit about how this society, perhaps, some of the challenges we face in terms of gender and class, and even coalition building with other oppressed people and groups? Because a lot of your work has been devoted to that, workers and Black Latino and Black Jewish. And
no, we're not the only people. We're not the only people on it. Look, people have this notion that we discovered all these new things like transnationalism. Look, Booker T. Washington in his Story of the Negro has 2 chapters, the founding chapters on women. A New Negro for a New Century, the founding chapters on Black women. There's a book published by Reginald Major in the 1890s called Noted Black Women. Nobody discovered gender last week. Black people, when they had brains in their head, knew that the women were as smart as men, and in most cases smarter.
Yes, sir. Well,
This did not come out of white feminism. Black people were there long time ago. White feminists were trying to get where Black women had already been. They say, we want to come out of the house and go into the workplace. We already been there. My mom started school when she's 13 years old. She don't need to be pointed to the workplace. She's trying to figure out how you get out of the workplace. That's what Black women want. A Black man is proud of his wife doesn't have to work. Not because she works anyway, because she don't trust him with the money. And she knows that, okay, if we get together, then you have a family. But we're not going to rely on your one job, because you know how white people are about Black men, and you might be unemployed any day, any minute, any time, because somebody call your name and you swing on them. Right? So I'm going to keep my job.
That's a key point.
Black women don't sit in their house doing nothing.
No, because Black women have always worked. That's exactly since
Black women, those mothers and wives of millionaire basketball players, they do work. They'll say, we have a committee that helps younger Black athletes stay out of trouble. They don't have to do nothing. If you LeBron James's wife, he make $30 million a year. You ain't got to worry about money. You say, okay, what you doing in the community? What you gonna do with all that money?
You're gonna work. gonna work.
Yeah,
Work to transform the community. That's right. That's right. And
it's lifting as we climb. The point is like I'm moving up, but I got my hand down and I'm taking you with me. You can call it respectability or whatever you want. If you're lying in the gutter, I'm going to stop and try to pick you up out of the gutter. Like I'm not going to get down there with you or say that's your way of life. That is not your way of life. Now I'm gonna stand you up. Now, if you decide to go back and lay down again, that's on you. But if I see you lying in the gutter, I'm not gonna say that's the way Black people are. No. That's what white people did to you. And I'm gonna give you a chance to do better. I'm gonna stand you up.
I'm glad you raised that, Baba, because you not only in your work with the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs, you've documented that, all that stuff is there. You've reached a stage now in your life and work. You've been chair of that department twice. I don't know how they pulled you back to do it again, but that's a story for them. Maybe that's part 2. But as you look forward, I know you've been working on memoirs. You've got some work, multi-volume work that you had committed to do with Ernie Allen on some other things. What do you see in terms of some of your projects you're working on now? Because we know you can't spell retire. So
we like I tell the young people, the goal in life was not to go out into the cornfields of Western Mass and do anything. This was a secondary. This is a retreat with the Nixon years. They're pushing us back. They're murdering people all over the country, Black Panthers and a whole bunch of other people, right? And so we got to have a place we can hold on until the movement comes back again. Save who you can. Take Bill Strickland out of Atlanta, Institute for the Black World. Get Chester Davis so he can do the school thing. Get Ernie Allen out of the League of Revolutionary Black World. We're trying to hold on, getting Mike out of SNCC. We're going to hold on till we can go back out into the street again and continue our work. Well, I tell students, I say, I thought this would be like 5 years and y'all would fire up again and we could go back out in the street.
Yes.
It took 50 years, but now y'all here.
Yes, sir.
That's what the work is. The work is not me talking about some book nobody's going to read, even though it might be important to you and your cousin and the people in your group at whatever school you're at.
Yes, sir.
You want to take that same ability of thought back into the community because we're still on the bottom.
Yes, sir.
Right? You know how many, like Malcolm said, what do you call a Negro with a PhD? And he said, what, they can say a nigger.
Wow.
Right? Don't get confused. White people will shoot you just as dead if you adopted so-and-so than if you're a delivery boy. And they have proved that. Barack Obama had all the bona fides you could possibly have.
That's right.
All the bona fides. He's educated on top of educated.
Yes, sir.
Right? Ain't mad about slavery because he didn't come through that way. He come from the empire. Not from the Middle Passage. So he ain't mad. You notice he ain't mad. He ain't mad like we mad.
No.
We're not going to get no Black person from Georgia because they mad.
Right.
And they know why they mad and they coming for us. That's why white people keep them guns. They said, no, we stole it and they want it back. And the way we treated them, like Du Bois said in Damnation of Women, and he wrote this in 1922 in Dark Water. He said, I will forgive white men all kinds of things. I will forgive slavery. I will forgive exploitation, but I will never forgive the treatment of Black women. I will never forgive that.
That's profound.
He said that in 1922.
Prof, it reminds me of something Michael Gomez wrote in his book, Exchanging Our Country Marks. He says that in his mind, it was the assault on Black women, sexual assault, physical assault, that literally became the rallying point that created this notion of Blackness in enslavement. It was the assault on, because it was really, that's literally an assault on the future. We know, we don't have a future if you literally. So, but let's pause here for a second. And I say pause because we want you to come back, Professor Bracey. We'll schedule some time for you to come back because we've only scratched the surface. We want to thank you for coming and spending this hour with us. And we are glad to see you hale and hearty and still singing with both fists. And particularly for young people out there, all the social movements, please pay very careful attention to the words we've heard from Professor John Bracey today because they provide a roadmap. Their roadmap for us. Thank you, Professor Bracey. And in a moment, when we return, I'm going to clear the table and we'll get ready for next week. Back in a moment on Black Star Network with The Black Table.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Welcome back to the Black Table. I'm Greg Carr here on the Black Star Network. We've been joined for the last hour by Professor John H. Bracey, Jr., a professor at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, a founding father of the field of Black studies, and one of the most important intellectuals of the 20th and early 21st centuries. Also an institution builder, non-parallel. And as we heard Professor Bracey discuss today, the importance of intellectual work, it can't really be overstated, but the importance of that work is also very important in direct relation to how it transforms the community and creates a better society. We heard him talk about the fact that when we think about universities, when we think about formal education, we think about the people who go there, who work there, who teach there, somehow perhaps being better than those who aren't. That's simply not true. We know, as the ancient Egyptians would say, that good speech, that deep thought, that the ability to think through problem solving is to be found among the masses of the people. And those who are the best at their jobs, like Professor John Bracey, know that and they practice that and continue to show us how to practice it. So join us next week for our next installment of the Black Table. And until then, everyone stay safe and we'll see you next week.